I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at GoldGB, here with Neil Cross, creator of Apple TV Plus's dramatic thriller, The Mosquito Coast. First of all, Neil, the first question I always wonder about things like this is why? Why did you decide to take this acclaimed novel by Paul Theroux and bring it to the small screen, I suppose?
Yeah, that's a more ambiguous question than you might think. I'm a lifelong. I'm trying to think of a better word, but there isn't one. I'm a lifelong fan of Paul Theroux. I was introduced to him, I think, The Great Railway Bazaar when I was about 14. So I'm pretty sure that I've read essentially every word that Paul Theroux has written and reread most of them. So he's been a big influence on and voice in my life. But the consequence of that was that when a colleague approached me and said, "Hey, you like Paul Theroux, what about the Mosquito Coast?" My first reaction was to say, no, absolutely not. So it was a process of being seduced by the opportunities rather than grabbing it immediately, if that makes any sense.
It does. So, I mean, why no? Why is it? Was it just too ambitious for you to take on?
Well, it was partly is the fact that I do love the book. And not only do I love the book, I would like it to go on the public record that there is, on the face of the planet, no greater fan of Harrison Ford than me. I would step into a kind of mixed martial arts arena to defend that proposition. And so on the one hand, the definitive adaptation of the novel as it stood, to my mind, had already been done. But more particularly, even disregarding the Harrison Ford of it all, is that the novel was a product of a very particular set of economic, political, and cultural circumstances. That Ali Fox in the book existed at a time which was, it was post-Nixon, it was post the oil shock. And he was kind of, he was of that disillusioned late 60s generation. He was kind of a sandal-wearing libertarian hippie, the kind of whole earth catalog generation, to which, ironically, Steve Jobs belonged. And I realized that the first issue would be, and there's two levels to Ali Fox as he is in the novel. Mm-hmm. And there's a kind of thematic level in which Ali embodies a certain kind of contrarian American anti-hero. It could be Randall McMurphy, it could be John Yossarian from Catch-22. But at the same time, as I say, he existed in a very particular time and space. So the biggest question was, how do we can't just copy and paste that guy to now, because we live in a very different set of economic, political, and cultural circumstances. So who would Ali be now? And there were other considerations as well, in that it's a very literary novel in which Paul deploys a certain number of literary techniques, literary ironic techniques, one of which is the character of Ali's wife in the book. Now, I characterize her as such because in the novel, and indeed in the film, she's not even given a name.
Yeah,
she's just known as Mother. And as I say, that's a kind of implicitly ironic comment that belongs to a novel. That a novel can kind of tease you with, but it doesn't translate in any way to the screen. That kind of irony just doesn't translate. No. So the second big question was, okay, if we are going to think about who this man would be if he were alive in the world now, who the hell is he married to? Who's this woman who's with him? So giving some thought to the character that became Margot was a huge component of what became essentially a reinvention, or to some extent a prequel.
Yeah, that's right. Because I've been wavering, like, this is prequel-esque, but it's also a bit of a reboot. It's a bit more of a deep dive. There's a lot going on here. And I immediately thought, after seeing the whole series, which I won't spoil for anyone who hasn't seen it all yet, obviously, is that it would have been incredibly challenging to find that tone, because you're right, we are in a different world now for Ali and for Margot than what perhaps Paul's original vision entailed. So we'll get into a more deeper dive on that a little later, but I'm also struck by this link between Justin, your leading man, and his uncle, which frankly I didn't really know before I started getting into this show, which just shows my ignorance. What are his strengths, Justin's, as number one on the call sheet, one of your fellow producers, and also having this family connection to the project?
Yeah, I mean, the Justin's name came up when we were talking about kind of potential allies. Justin's name came up in a way that was entirely unconnected to his kind of familial connection to Paul. In as much as, you know, Justin has these very singular qualities as an actor. He's fantastically charismatic. He's fantastically intelligent. He's fantastically likable, even when he's being an asshole. So when his name came up, I found myself very quickly in an Uber on my way to meet him, which was a moment for me of some existential terror. And we met for coffee, and as is my habit, I was wildly over caffeinated and nervous and, you know, dying for a cigarette. And he expressed then all of those qualities that make him such a fantastic colleague, in as much as he was an absolute gentleman, and he went out of his way to put me at my ease, which is a kind of reverse of how that relationship is supposed to be. I'm supposed to go in as the executive producer and be super calm and know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I was troubled at that point. Kind of got to know Justin, I was troubled by, in fact, before I met Justin, I was troubled by the family connection, rather than seeing it as a marketing advantage or whatever. I was troubled by the implications, because Justin has this profound familial connection, not just to the writer of the book, but to the characters in his family that Ali was based on. So Ali Fox is literally in Justin's DNA. And at the same time, I had my own lifelong, equally passionate, but very, very different relationship with Paul Theroux and his work. And I thought, well, you know, this is, it seemed to me that there was an enormous potential there for conflict and disagreement, and actually, in a weird way, a sort of tussle over ownership. And none of which came to pass, because the first thing Justin did was A, put me at my ease as a human being, and B, make it kind of clear just through conversation that we were seeing this guy in the same way. So that was revelatory to me. That was a really good moment.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that just adds a whole other dimension to what is already you under a lot of pressure to bring this thing to life and to make it the best thing you can make it. And then you have this other very fascinating and unusual dimension. So kudos to all of you for navigating that, because obviously there would have been maybe some compromise, but also you have a vision. It's your show. And is that right? That it really, at the end of the day, you were able to just kind of put your stamp on what you wanted this to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want this to sound like blowing smoke, but the remarkable thing about the relationship with Justin is that A, he saw what I wanted to do, B, he kind of agreed and bought into it, and C, and this is for me, I'm such a control freak. This was also revelatory for me that when Justin did make suggestions, they were never structural or story suggestions. They were always kind of character moments. They were always additive. They always improved the script every time. There's a moment in episode 2 where we have Ali and Dina under some pressure at a homeless camp, and Ali gives a spiel about the nature of homelessness. And Justin called me up and said, "What about this?" And I'd labored over this speech, and it was a bit of a speech. I mean, it took up space on the page. And he has a way of doing what he calls the haiku version, which is to to take the thesis and shorten it down, but he also expanded it and improved it. And I think rather brilliantly, as well as putting a new spin on my dialogue in that scene, he was able to incorporate a direct quote from the novel as well. So that kind of creative relationship with Justin was kind of, it was low impact and low effort, but always improved the script.
Yeah, that's gold. So the other thing I immediately thought about when I started watching it was that you dropped us right into the middle of the story. There's no exposition really. We just have to go along with this journey, and we're always kind of one step behind the protagonists. And we're the only ones, kind of apart from the kids, that don't really know what's happening and why. Why was it better to do it that way?
Just really because I'm old-fashioned and cheap, and I like an adventure, and I like a mystery, and I like a tease. The truth is, as well, that the season is a little shorter than we'd intended. Mm-hmm. So although I like teasing the mystery, we had intended to make a few revelations that we weren't able to. But in such a way that I think that I'm actually rather pleased with, because I think that we've dropped the breadcrumbs in a way that I find satisfying. Because I'm able to sit down and watch the show with friends and watch them pick up the breadcrumbs and make their own conclusions.
Yeah. Some people might have just wanted everything blurted out by the end. I didn't. So without spoiling this, I just, as you know, the final episode ends on a scene with Ali having a particular look on his face. There are tears there. There's a song being played. And I found that immensely satisfying, because I was so ready, or I am so ready to know more. And I'm just now, I have no idea whether you're going to get a season 2. Do you have any clue yet?
I'm not sure that's something I'm allowed to talk about.
Yeah, but let's just say that it's not necessarily out of the question. Is that maybe something that you can...
Let's say it's not out of the question, yeah.
Because if not, that would have been a real tease. We get all this build up and then no. So hopefully we'll see more. But I thought that was a very effective way. So obviously I know it's hard to talk without being specific, but why did you decide to end the series on a particular note where it just kind of leaves us all on the edge of our seats?
Because one of the, again, I don't want to deploy any cliches, but one of the journeys that we're taking this version of Ali on is a psychological, we're taking him from being Jimmy Stewart to Jim Jones.
Yeah.
And this was one of the moments when his, there's a crack in the carapace, and we see some of the lunacy lurking underneath. And again, to go back to the relationship with Justin, is that when I was talking to him about this scene and how we're going to stage it and how we're going to shoot it, he suggested the music that we use. So the very last touch, which I think is perfect. I have a particular animus. I really hate that song and I really hate that band. It's absolutely perfect for the moment. And to the extent, in fact, that we took that final song and rather cunningly incorporated it into a key moment in episode 1 that people will only notice on a rewatch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course. You know what? Actually, I freaking hate that song as well, but it just works. It works. And I was
the lunacy in his eyes and that.
Yes.
And the expression on his family's face.
It's brilliant. And because I always want more opportunities to hear Antonio Pinto's score. I'm putting money down that I think he's going to win awards for this score. It's so brilliant. But that was a good time to not have to go back to his score and to use something different. So applause for that one. Yeah. Now, you mentioned Margot. She's played by Melissa George. Now, as a fellow Aussie, obviously I'm biased, but I honestly believe not only is she one of the most beautiful women on earth, but she is so good in this show because I just have no clue what her motivations are, and I like that. So talk us through that character and developing that character with her.
As I say, it was a key element of kind of developing this reinvention or reboot or whatever you want to call it of the show, was to think very hard and very seriously about Margot. And given that Ali has certain attributes, he's a self-determined paterfamilias of this family. He's kind of, he's not a tyrant, but there is an element of Ali which is head of household. But if Ali is head of household, it's only because Margot allows it to be so. What I wanted was not have Ali accompanied by a character who was his acolyte or his, or his disciple. That not only are they equals intellectually and emotionally, we begin to tease out the possibility that in fact maybe Margot might be the dominant personality in this relationship. Yeah. And in fact, I think that is the case. And it was fun to start with Melissa playing what looks on first introduction is, housewife is a very old-fashioned word. What's the new word for that?
Whatever that is, yes, but that's right.
And begin to reveal bit by bit by bit that she is really not that at all. And there are moments throughout the show. We see Margot emotionally unleashed in a moment that I love towards the end of episode 2, where she and a character called Chewie dance to Morrissey. So it's one of my favorite moments on screen that I've ever done, and that was a high wire thing, because that could have gone. Writing happiness is really dodgy. Really? Writing joy is it translates as sickly rather often. But having a moment of kind of unbridled joy on screen, I love that moment. But also in episode 4, we see Margot can be pretty cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say, episode 2, where the Morrissey dance, I found it so fun to watch, but slightly confronting, because I just was so worried about something happening. But episode 4 with Aunt Lucretia, that's when I realized, the Margot character's more to her, and we're going to have to just be patient. But she snaps into something else that I didn't see coming. Melissa George has a beautiful way of being very demure and very kind of at ease and calm, but she's got this underlying tension. She's just really good at that. And in that moment, I was really taken aback by her performance. So I think that was intentional. So
she has a way of suddenly on a dime, whatever the expression is, of becoming suddenly utterly emotionally unavailable and incredibly fierce and strong, in a way which still belongs to that same character. So she's able to project a coldness, a determination, and a strength that you realize has been there all along, and she chooses to express it when she needs to. And I think it gives us a number of great moments.
Yeah, it does. Actually, my favorite moment of the whole series, I guess so far from what's aired for people who haven't seen the last 2, is in episode 4 at the bus stop. It just encapsulates the issue that we should have with Ali, and that's when Chewie excoriates him and says, "You are America, and you'll never get away from it because you consume people. So you are what you despise." To me, that's very powerful. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, Chewie is expressing the thesis of the show. I've written it down somewhere because I keep forgetting it. There's a quote from Horace that I now can't find, but it's, they change the stars, but not their hearts who cross the ocean. That no matter where you go, you take yourself with you. And Ali exemplifies in many ways this kind of American frontier optimism, that there's always a better place over the next border. There's always over the next horizon, over the next hill. There's always somewhere better. But that's also a function of what we would now describe as American soft power. they're always expanding the borders of what is America. And Ali thinks he's the good guy. Ali thinks he's right. Ali thinks that whatever situation he steps into, he can improve it. And often it would be better if he were not to do that. So I live in what used to be called, if you were a writer, it used to be called exile. But I live far away from the country where I was born. And you think when you make that move, there must be something kind of existentially transformative about living somewhere else. But in many ways, and I experience this when I'm in the United States, very particularly, in many ways, almost despite yourself, you find that you amplify the things that you bring with you. I am never more English than when I'm in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And Ali is never more American than when he's outside of America.
That's so fascinating. It's like the migrant experience. You come to another country. Like my parents came from Sicily years and years ago, never more Sicilian until they came here. Finally, I wanted to go back in history and look at your 2 Emmy nominations for Luther, 2012 and 2014. What's it like to be nominated? I think the better question is it really amazing to have that first one where it's a big surprise, or is the second one even better because it's a seal of approval?
I've got a really weird attitude to award in that I don't want to make this sound like I wasn't incredibly appreciative of the nominations, but there is a part of me, a big part of me, which is just kind of thinking, oh, that's stupid. I don't belong there. I don't belong in that world. And so it's not imposter syndrome, because I'm really proud of the stuff that we're nominated for. And I love Luther, and it's a huge part of my life. But it was more of an anthropological experience than an affirmation. You know, you find yourself in wherever they hold these venues. And I remember I was there with my wife, and she was, you know, particularly staggered by walking next to Betty White. So there is this element of, you know, what the hell am I doing here? So it was all of the things they say about award nominations, all the cliches are true. It genuinely is an honor to be nominated, but it's just a strange environment to find yourself in.
I can imagine. And having been there myself, not as a nominee, but it's a very surreal experience to witness and to go through. But on that note, I just wanted to congratulate you on a really strong first season, and thanks so much, Neil, for your time today.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It was nice to meet you.
You too.